This is so incredible. Seeing so many people walking from class to class, sitting and learning Torah. Just such an honor to be part of it. Today's topic is about a word that most of us don't really know what it means, but we all want it. When I say it, you're going to say, yeah, I want it. But I don't really know what it is, but whatever it is, I want more of that. And that is success. Do you want to be successful? Yeah. What does it mean? Don't know. Kids to be successful? Yeah. Family, marriage, children, economy, business, Jewish people? Yes, 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 yes. Success, success, success. What does it mean? I have no idea. And the hope for this talk and the goal of this talk is to delve into the concept of what does it mean to be truly successful vis-a-vis the Torah. What does God say? What does the Torah teach about the process and the mechanism of success? So, within the word of success is two C's. It's a coincidence, but I want to build an entire class today really on just the two C's of success. And I believe the Torah teaches us, I don't think it's connected to the English language, but just as a good mnemonic, I believe that the Torah teaches us what the secrets of success are, and the way we could remember it and put it into our lives is by just remembering these two C's. And that's what I want to talk about today. That's it. Two C's. What are the two C's of success? So what is success? So we make a very strange blessing. Maybe it's the most popular blessing we make in many times throughout our day, because anytime you eat certain foods or drink certain drinks, there's an after blessing that you say, and it's a very strange after blessing. Here's how it goes. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, blessed you are God. Borei nefashos rabos v'chesronan. Thank you for creating lots and lots of people and their deficiencies. Basically, we're thanking God for us being deficient. And the rabbis all ask, why? And I heard from a rabbi named Rabbi Pesach Krohn, I think he was here before, and he said, I'll tell you why. Because success will only come through the connection to other people. Nobody can ever feel successful alone. You can take somebody who is the most successful individual ever. If they are alone, they can't appreciate it. The quality of your life is based on the quality of your relationships. And when you go through life and think, I can do it on my own, you are on the path away from success. So we turn to God and say, God, thank you for being deficient. Because now I have to get married if I want to produce offspring. Now I have to go to the doctor. I have to go to the lawyer. Well, I don't think anyone thinks for you to go for a lawyer, but that's a whole other story. Now I have to go here and there, and the baker and the butler. I have to go around and ask for help. And in the process of filling my life because I am deficient, I get more than the stuff that I'm supposed to be getting. I get the relationship. And the essence of all success is built on the principle that the quality of our relationships will change the quality of our lives. Well, what is a relationship? What is the core of a relationship? And that is one thing and one thing only. Communication. What you do pales into comparison to what you say. The way we communicate is the core of how we relate. The actions are very important, but it is the speech that makes us connected, right? There's a famous story of a man who forgot his anniversary. And he comes home and his wife goes, anything special today? And he goes, it's a Tuesday. And that's it. In the doghouse. So he goes to his rabbi and goes, Rabbi, I don't know what I did wrong. And the rabbi goes, listen, your wife appreciates it at these moments. It's an important day for you. Be a man, go home and show your wife how much your anniversary means. He goes, Rabbi, you're brilliant. What should I do? So the rabbi goes, go out to the store, buy the biggest bouquet of flowers you can afford, and go bring it to your wife, and you'll see right away she'll be happy with you. He goes, Rabbi, your brilliance overwhelms me. He goes out to the store, buys this huge bouquet of flowers. He knocks on his door. His wife opens the door and goes, oh, and he goes, here, the rabbi told me to buy these for you. The actions are important, but in truth, the core of a relationship is communication. But what is communication? We think communication is what I say. You ever get into a fight with somebody and all the conversation really is I speak and then I'm waiting for you to be done, or just take a breath and then I keep on speaking? And we think that the communicators out there are the people that speak, but it's not true. Communication has very little to do with what you say. The truth is, communication has to do with what you hear. Because in life, as we speak to other people, there are blocks to our communication. Sometimes we speak a different language and there's a block. Like I said earlier, for those that came to the earlier class, about my neighbor across the street, who's an American guy, he speaks no Hebrew, and his Israeli wife who speaks no English, which makes apparently for an interesting marriage. They can try forever, but unless you can hear it, there's a block. They speak a different language. Sometimes you're speaking the same language, but the words are a little different. I have the opportunity, with God's help, hopefully, to speak in different parts of the Jewish world. And I got to tell you, there are a few places that I am very intimidated by. The one place that I am very intimidated, I'm always intimidated to get up. I'm always honored by the opportunity. And I always pray to God that he puts the right words in my mouth, because the people in front of me deserve from him. But there's one place on the map that I get incredibly nervous to speak for. It's because in this place in the world, everybody sounds so smart. What am I speaking about? London, England. There's something about it. To an American, there's something about that accent, no matter what they say. I'm from Brooklyn. You understand something? I could be reciting a theorem, and they're like, what, are you cursing? I don't understand what you're saying. In England, everybody sounds incredible. It's so intimidating. I spoke once at a conference in England, much smaller than this. And I'll never forget, I was walking up the stage, a young boy, he couldn't have been more than 8 years old. As I'm walking up, goes, oh, hello. And I'm like, oh. Are you the speaker? I'm like, not anymore. And then he reaches into his pocket, I kid you not, and he goes, would you like a sweet? It has loads of sugar. And I'm like, are you a professor? I'm going home. Apparently in England, they use English, but it's different than American English. In England, there are different words. So I was in Israel for the year, and my roommate was English. And we were up in the Bar Kokhba caves. And I'll never forget, he turns to me in the middle of the caves and says, Charlie, would you like a torch? A torch in American is an actual torch. I'm like, you brought a torch, the fire, to a cave? What are you, Indiana Jones? Yes, I want a torch. Apparently a torch, in English, I don't know how it is here, is a flashlight. He pulls out of his pocket and goes, here you go. I'm like, this isn't a torch. I was pumped. We could be talking day and night, but the words are different, so there's a block. Sometimes you're not even speaking at all, but you're speaking two totally different languages. Sometimes you see this with a husband and a wife, the traditional husband and wife, where she may say, you don't tell me enough that you love me. And he may say, my whole life is for you. I work every second for you. My every existence is for you. And she says, but you don't tell me the words, I love you. And he's saying, what do you need to know the words for? Don't you see my life? I gotta do more. And this couple could be married for 50 years, God bless. And there's a block. They could be talking, but they're missing something. Because the essence of communication is not what you say in the way you speak. The essence of communication is the humility to speak in the way that they hear it. When you can understand how somebody else hears something and speak not in the way you speak, but in the way they listen, that is the way you can communicate. And you can have a couple, and they're wonderful, God bless them, their whole lives saying, I show you I love you by my action. And she's saying, I want to hear it in the words. And they will stand on ground until one of them says, I speak this way, but that's not communication. If I really want to communicate, I need to speak in the way you hear, not in the way that I speak. It happens with parents and children all the time, right? You see kids, if you've got a few kids, and you tell one, I love you, immediately what does that mean to the rest of them? You don't love them. You gotta go, I love you, and I love you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you. And then you have your own kids, like I said earlier, and you have to actually raise them. And all of a sudden, every moment of I love you is every diaper, and every worry, and every cough, and every earache. And you go, you know what? My mom doesn't have to say, I love you. Her whole life is me. When she's calling to see where I am for the 80th time, that's her way of saying, I love you. And parents and children can go a whole life, never once thinking, maybe I should stop speaking in my way. Maybe I can listen in her way. You know, maybe when I grew up, I didn't have the challenges of my kid. Anyone raising teenagers right now? I guarantee you, you did not have what they had. And maybe some parents get down on a knee and go, you know, what is my child grappling with that I didn't grapple with when I was that age? Can I hear the way they speak, not the way I speak? And the essence of true communication and by the way, anyone who's in business, you know this. Your company exists. This is called user experience. I spoke this morning about this at breakfast. Anyone who knows this in business and in life and in Judaism, the success you will have will be based on how much you can hear somebody else. How humble we can be to realize that my perspective isn't the only perspective, but if I can hear you in the way you speak, now I know how to communicate to you. Now, if this is true between man and man, which it is, and this is true between families and businesses, between our communities, this is absolutely true with us, between us and God. The relationship between us and God really is a relationship, just communication. And the essence of understanding how to live with God is the core of how to communicate to him and how he communicates to us. What do I mean? So let's learn it the way we learn everything, a story. For those who were here this morning, or this afternoon, we spoke about Judah. For those that were here last night, we spoke about Esther. And we're going to finish the trifecta right now in speaking about Joseph. Because when you understand Joseph, you know, if we would ever do a poll, if I would tell you right now, if Forbes was coming out with the top 100 most powerful Jews ever, right? Who do you think would be number one on the list? Forget religion. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses, I get it. Forget the God stuff. Important. Love God. I'm talking about money, power, influence, whatever the rest of the world thinks is important. Who would be number one on that list? Who was the most powerful man, just from a world perspective, ever? Isn't it Joseph? No. He was second in command to the king of Egypt. Now, Egypt today is a third world country, right? I mean, for the most part, we only know about it because when we fly to Israel, like it's on the live map. You know what I'm saying? But like, outside that, we don't really know. But back then, the center of the world was Egypt. And they controlled the world's food, which as Jews, we understand how important that is. The center of the world was Egypt. And the man who basically ran the antiquity was Pharaoh. And Pharaoh basically relegated all power to a Jewish boy. So if you think about power and prestige, success on all physical levels, the ultimate success story, the rags to riches, wouldn't it be Joseph? What was the secret of his success? How did he become so successful? So let's look into his life. Because if we were writing the story of Joseph, I would think it's like the typical story of like the kid that was always the perfect kid. You know that kid? He's always the front in school, and he always gets all the A's, and he's good looking, and he's got good midos, and he's perfect, and he graduates, and he becomes a rabbi, and gets an MBA, and he goes to business school, he goes to Israel for 2 years, he gets married, he's got a bunch of kids, he goes to Harvard, and the whole thing. And then finally, you know, Pharaoh's looking for a COO, and he finds a guy. But if you look at the story of Joseph, what you find is the exact opposite. Let's delve for a minute into the life of Joseph. Because there is no one with a life as topsy-turvy as his. And just for a couple minutes right now, be with him. Take him out of the page and make him a human being like he was. And the story begins with an 8-year-old boy. And this 8-year-old boy started his life on the top of the world. His father, Jacob, was coming back to Canaan. And the verse says that when he came to Canaan, he lined up all of his wives and children. And as the verse goes through the wives and children, when it gets to the last wife, Rachel, it says he lined up all the wives, children's, wives, children's, wives, children, and he lined up Joseph and Rachel. And Rashi says, hey, wait a second, you're missing the order, it's wife and children. And Rashi answers that actually he put Rachel first. And Joseph stood in front of his mom because he knew that his uncle Esav was going to come, and he didn't want his uncle to look at his mom, so he wanted to defend mommy. Can you imagine how adorable is that? An 8-year-old little boy? Don't look at my mommy. Can you imagine? That's incredible. Because he started his life off all the way on the top. Think about it. If Rachel was one of the mothers, she must have been a pretty good mother. You know what I'm saying? Like, to qualify for being a matriarch, man, you must have done your job fairly well. And she had one son. He was the ultimate mama's boy. You can imagine bedtime was amazing, and waking up was amazing, and he was well fed and loved. You can only imagine in the tent of Rachel how much love that Joseph got as the apple of the eye of one of our matriarchs. And he finds out that his mom is pregnant, and he is so excited. He hopes it's a boy, because the girls have cooties, and he doesn't want a boy he can play ball with. And he finally finds out that she's going into labor, and he can't wait, and Jacob is in the tent, and he comes out, and Joseph, he must be 10 years old. Think of a 10-year-old boy. And Joseph goes, what did she have, Daddy? What, is it a boy? Is it a boy? Is it a boy? Is it a boy? And Jacob goes, it's a boy. And she goes, yes! I can't wait. We're going to play ball. It's going to be amazing. There's shalom sachar, there's chocolate pretzels. It's going to be wonderful. I can't wait. It's going to be amazing. And when can I go see Mommy? And Jacob says, honey, Mommy's in Shemayim right now. It's 10. The apple of his eye. And Joseph starts his life in the gutter. But you know what? Jacob's an incredible dad. And he works him. And he builds him. And he invests in him. And every sweat and every moment, Jacob is pushing into that boy Joseph. And he's working him, and he's 11, and he's 12, and he's 13. And you know what's happening? He can sleep again. And he's 14, and he's 15, he's having dreams. And his dreams include his mom, and he's seeing himself as a leader. And he's 15 years old, and he's 16. And he's got his special coat, and he feels like a special boy. And finally, after dealing with the death of his own mother, and by the way, when she passed away, his brothers weren't sitting Shiva with him. They all went home to mom. He sat Shiva alone. And at 15, 16, 17, he was tall. They said in the pasuk he was a good-looking, strong, smart boy. And finally, he's making a life for himself. And he's the right hand to the spiritual giant of the generation, Jacob. And at 17, Jacob tells Joseph, do me a favor, honey. Your brothers on the other side of town. Go get your brothers. Right? So Joseph goes to Gezrah. Remember the story? And remember, listen, boys will be boys, right? We all know that when you send the boy to a whole bunch of other brothers, you never know what happens next, right? That's the rule. You know, there's a rule that if you have 4 sons, you're going straight to heaven. Did you hear about this rule? Used to be 7, they cut it to 4 apparently. You're going straight to heaven. So any mom with 4 sons is going to heaven. Do you know why you're going to heaven? Because your life is hell, right? It's only fair. Because boys will be boys, right? I've got boys and I've got girls. And every morning the school bus picks them up. I'll never forget when they first put them on that school bus. And the bus pulls up, and I've got my boys, and I can see, and it's an all-boys bus, and I can see the fear on the eyes of that bus driver as limbs fly over his head. And he looks at me, I go, where are you taking my son? He goes, wherever they'll take these kids, I just got to get on the bus. And he goes on the bus, and he comes home, and he's all roughed up. And he goes to my wife, and she goes, what happened? And he's like, it's okay, they beat me up. And he goes, I'm calling the school. I'm like, you're not calling school. I'm like, are you okay? He's like, I think so, Daddy. I'm like, you have all your limbs? He's like, I think so. You'll be fine. You'll get back on that bus. You'll be fine. And then my girls, I got identical twin girls. And then the girls' bus pulls up. And they're like, Daddy, we're so nervous. And they pull up, and all the girls pull up, and 2 8th grade girls come out, and they go, oh, twins! Ah! Come on the bus, we're gonna make braids, and pick out our diamond wedding rings, and we're gonna play machanayim, it's gonna be wonderful. And I'm like, I love girls. And God knows, if men weren't born to women and marry women, we'd last 1 generation and it would be all over. That's the rule. Because we don't have things as men that women do, like simple basic concepts like showering doesn't come normal to a regular guy. They have to be told 1,000,000 times. We have our son, I'll never forget, my son goes to summer camp. I'll never forget this. My first time he went to camp, my wife, knowing my son, actually prepared clothes for him each day. She made a shirt, pants, socks. All he had to do was take it out of his thing, and every day until visiting day, he'd have an outfit. So it's visiting day, and we come up, and my wife walks into the bunk, and she looks at his cubbies, and she says, Moshe, you fold laundry just like me. And she goes, hey, wait a second. That's how I folded it. Did you not change your pants since you got to camp? And I'm thinking, and Moshe turns to my wife and goes, what? They still fit. It's totally fine. And I'm thinking, they still fit. It's totally fine. And my wife turns to me and she goes, Charlie. I'm like, Moshe, that's disgusting. It's not a normal thing. The best is, by the way, when I ask my boys and my girls about their friends. That's the best. I don't know if this happens to you with your kids. I'll ask my son, who's that guy in camp? Who's that kid? He's like, oh, that kid? His name's Levine. I'm like, what's his first name? He's like, Levine? I'm like, you've been in school with him since the first grade. He's like, we call him Gatorade, Levine. I asked my girls, what's her name? Oh, that's so-and-so, and I know her mother, I know her aunt, and her brother's upset, and then she knows the drama of the family. Because boys will be boys. And thank God we have moms. And thank God we have wives. Baruch Hashem, we can survive another year. But I can promise you one thing. No one ever thinks that you're going to send your son to see his brothers, and the brothers are going to say, listen, the economy's rough, and I heard I can get $20 for you, so see you later. Ever. And that's what happens. But for a second, can you imagine 17 years old Joseph loses his mom? He walks into his brothers. They had some fights. He said some things that they may not have liked. And they turned to sell him to Egypt. But I want you to explain you something. They weren't going to sell him and he would WhatsApp them when they got down. This was death. And he turns to his brother and goes, no, I get it. We're fighting. We're brothers. But this is my death. Like, you're my brothers. This is family. 17. Next to his dad, all the way in the gutter. So you know what happens? He ends up in Egypt. But he's Joseph. So you know what he does? He ends up in a man's house named Potiphar. Potiphar was the third most wealthiest man in the entire of Egypt. So he was a very important guy. And he came in as the Hebrew slave, and he climbed and climbed and climbed and climbed and climbed. He was Joseph. Climbed and climbed and climbed. And in 1 year, he became so well known that he was considered basically the COO, the chief operating officer of this entire estate. And he goes from the bottom again, and he climbs. And now at 18 years old, he's only 18, he's at the top. He's got a chief of staff. He's got servants. He has meetings every morning. He's planning strategy. He's at the top again. And then Potiphar, remember the story? Potiphar's wife wants to do the wrong thing. You know what Joseph does? The right thing. You know what God should do? Send down balloons and bring him home. You know what God gives him from doing the right thing? Jail. A hole. Right back down. 18. And then he's Joseph, so he climbs, and he's the good guy, and he's the good guy, and he's the good guy. And he starts becoming the second in command to the warden, and people start asking him for advice, and then start interpreting dreams. And he climbs, and he climbs, and he climbs, and he climbs. And 10 years, this didn't happen in 2 pages, a decade of his life, 18 to 28, he rises to the top of the prison till he gets to the point where the butler and the baker are coming to him, and he's prophesizing dreams. And he gets them right, and he tells the butler, do me a favor, can you hook me up out there? And the butler goes, sure, no problem. I'll look you up on Facebook. It'll be totally fine. I'll find you when I get out. And Joseph's waiting by the window a minute, a day, a week, a month. And he realizes that he ain't looking me up. And it all goes down again. And then at 30 years old, can you imagine this all happened before he was 30? At 30 years old, the call comes in. Pharaoh's got a dream no one can interpret. Joseph steps in, gets the dream right, and rises to being the most successful human being, arguably, or of the most successful Jews ever. And if you hear this story, and we'd have to play out his religious explanation, we would all say that religious, chances are when he got to Egypt, he was mad at God. But you know, after he became successful, someone came up to him, they invited him to an Adar, he got more inspired, and at the end he got good and he became religious again. But truthfully, after having your mom die, and have him getting sold out by your brothers, you'd have some issues with God. He came to Egypt. The whole place was filled with idolatry. He probably was mad at God. And later in life, he found God. But if you look in slowly, and if you have the time to go into the verses, I beg you, it's incredible. You look into the verses, you will find that Joseph is the frummest, most religious guy ever. He is actually more religious in Egypt than he was back at home with his father Jacob. Everything he says, the pasuk says, the verse says, he was successful. And they said, why was he so successful for? And the Rashi says, because Shem Shamayim Shagura B'fiv. Everything he said was with God's help. Emir Tzashem. Emir Tzashem. We thought Sem Girls created Emir Tzashem, right? They just came up with the lyrics. Emir Tzashem. Joseph wrote the lyrics. Everything, God's help. When Pharaoh asks him, can you interpret my dream? Can you imagine doing this at the office? Can you interpret my dream? He goes, I don't know, it's up to God. And Pharaoh's like, what? What'd you just say? You said Baruch Hashem? Did you just Baruch Hashem me? Pharaoh's saying. He is the most religious guy ever. And it's that holding on to his religion that makes him through it all. And the question that I ask is how? What did he know? What did he see that made him so strong? That had he held on, had he lost his grip once in Egypt, he would have been lost forever. But he held on to that faith. Why? What did he know that he held on to that faith? So I want to take you back for a moment to the story. And I want, if we can, just take one moment. It's so subtle that we miss it, but it's everything in the moment. That's where all the good stuff comes in Torah. It's in the stuff that we all miss. And in this one moment is the secret to what Joseph saw and why he was so successful. Let's go back. And I want to take you right to the moment before they sell Joseph. So remember the story? Joseph shows up, the brothers put him in a pit, and they lift him from the pit and they sell him. But here's what they say beforehand. The brothers are eating. And all of a sudden they lifted their eyes, Vayar, and they saw, Hine Orchos Yishmaelim, a caravan of Arab merchants, Ba'amil Gilad, came from a place called Gilad, Ugamalehem, and their camels, Nosot, were carrying Nochaot Utsri Velot. The brothers were putting Joseph in a pit, not knowing what to do with him. They're eating their meal. They look up and they see in a caravan of Arab merchants, and they were carrying on this caravan spices, all these sweet smelling spices, and they say, why don't we sell him to Egypt? And all the commentators say, wait a second, why in the world do we care what's on the caravans? What does it matter what they were carrying? Just tell me they were caravans. I don't care. And the answer that the Rashi gives is, in those days, the merchants, the Arab merchants, were known for trading in petroleum and tar, in very terrible smelling substances. But because Joseph was righteous, God made a miracle and had Arab merchants on that day carrying sweet smelling spices. So in order to give Joseph, this is what you do to righteous people, you hook them up. And God's hookup was, instead of having a petroleum and tar ride down, God had them have a spice ride down. Anyone see a problem with this? God's hookup to Joseph after he gets kidnapped is switching the sweeter, the smell. For real, can you imagine? As if he's like, oh, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. Is that vanilla spice? Is there cinnamon on this caravan? Oh, this is incredible. Thank you, God, for the miracle. As if, you want to pull a miracle, God? I don't know. Why don't you have the caravan break down and send them home? No. God's way of hooking up Joseph is, he's going to send him down to Egypt, of course, but on the way down, he's got vanilla spice to join him on the way down. So what really happened? And let's delve together. Joseph's on the way down. But be Joseph for a moment. How do you think he feels? You know, the great part about raising children is that you get to live a life of truth. When the kids are little, all you get is truth, right? When they get to be 5 or 6 years old, then like they move them to school, we tell them what to be, they start to get into it. But when they're like 2 and 3, right? 2 and 3-year-old, it's just truth. When they come home from school, I don't know if it's like, if your children are the same. My kids come home from school, they're too busy for me. You know what I'm talking about? The 3-year-olds, the 4-year-olds, the 5-year-olds, they're buzzing and buzzing, they're running and going. They can't stop talking to mom and dad, right? They're all like on trial, right? How's your day? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. Who'd you play with? Nobody. Everything's a one-word answer, right? How was school? Bad. Every kid, same answer, bad. They could be having school in an amusement park, bad. If you want to get your kids to hang out with you, all parents today, this is the lesson. You want to get your kids to love you and be with you? You say one word and you own them. You say, bedtime. And they go, bedtime? What do you mean? I gotta go to bed? And they go, can you lay with me? I'm sorry, honey, I can't. Can you be with me? I can't, honey, I'm sorry. Please. And then they become the greatest, the negotiators ever, right? Can you be with me for 5 minutes? I can't. 3 minutes? You can't lay down with your own daughter for 15 seconds? And you're like, fine, because they know that once they get you in bed, they own you till they fall asleep, you know what I'm saying? So now you get into bed, now you're stuck. So you become like an expert at breathing patterns. You ever do this? You're like, it's okay, honey, just close your eyes. Then you're like, I think they're sleeping now. Now you gotta get out of the bed, but you can't get out of the bed because the bed's gonna squeak, right? So you gotta crawl out, but you can't because so you become like a cross between like an acrobat and a commando. And you're like trying to shift your weight on the bed to get over. And as you're free, those beady little eyes just pop open. And they're like, boop. And where do you think you're going? Right? You're like, no, I wasn't leaving, I was stretching. Why would I want a life after 7 o'clock at night, right? You know why kids hate bedtime? Because kids are truth. You know what the greatest fear we all have in life is? Being alone. You ever walk into a party, you have no one to talk to, you talk to anyone about anything, just not to be the person sitting in a room of other people and not talking to somebody. You ever get into a car and just you put things on just so that they're on? Because the sound of loneliness is so hard to bear. For a minute, be Joseph. Be Joseph. His mom died. His own brothers sold him out. He's down the caravan. You know, the question that people ask is, why didn't he get in touch with his father after he became king? And I saw a beautiful commentary that said, if you look at the way it all passed down, the tradition passed down, everybody there was very aware of tradition. How did tradition pass down until Joseph? The father usually had 2 sons, and he favored one, and the mom came in and picked the other one, right? Abraham had 2 sons. Who did he favor? Initially, Ishmael. And Sarah said, get rid of him. And then Isaac had 2 sons. Who did he favor? Esau. He was going to give him the blessings. What did Rivka do? She picked Jacob. Jacob's got 2 sons, basically 2 firstborns. He's got Rachel's firstborn, Joseph, and he's got Leah's firstborn, Reuben. So if you're Joseph, think about it. One day your father wakes up and sends you off. He wasn't part of the conversation. And then all you know is your father sends you to a town, your brothers pick you up and sell you. So Joseph thinks, arguably, his father sold him out. Joseph's on the way down to Egypt, and he is alone. No mom, no dad, no brothers, no God, nothing. He's a nobody. He's invisible, and he's forgotten. And he starts to descend into that place of hopelessness and loneliness, and all of a sudden something happens on the caravan. He smells something. Is that spices? Wait a second. These are Arab merchants. And they always carry petroleum and tar. Why are there spices on the caravan? You see, Joseph understands the concept of being sent down to Egypt. You know how he knows it? His great-grandfather went down there. Abraham shows up in Israel and God goes, go down to Egypt. He's unfamiliar with going alone in exile. His father Jacob ran away with nothing in his pocket. Joseph is very aware of just how much it is to run to exile. But in the beginning of time until that moment, there was never a person that God asked of something in which God didn't speak in the person's language. God spoke in Abraham's language and said, Abraham, go down. And Abraham heard it in his language, and he went. Jacob went down, and God said, before you go, let me give you a dream. I'm going to show you angels. So when Jacob went down, in his language, he understood. God said, I'm with you. But for the first time in human history, God sent somebody down to exile and changed the way he spoke. He was still speaking, but he spoke in God's language. He spoke in coincidence. He spoke in little nuances. He spoke in shifting the spices. God never told Joseph, go down, I'll be with you. All God did was take a small nuance and shifted it a drop. But Joseph, the king of success, understood that communication is not the way I like to hear it. It's the way you say it. And all it took for Joseph was that one moment where he says, wait a second, there's no spices on these caravans. Why am I spelling spices for? Because God is saying, I'm with you. He's not speaking in English. He's not speaking in Hebrew. He's not speaking in dreams. He's speaking in God language. He's speaking in coincidences. He's speaking in the nuances of the world, the way God talks to man and humanity. And what made Joseph so successful was that he had the humility to hear the way God speaks, not the way we speak. And if you look at that was it. He held on to God, and can you imagine what he went through being in jail after saying no to Potiphar's wife? But he held on, and he held on, and he held on. And like everyone else in life that holds on, at some point you look back and go, I get it. A man spoke to God. A man went to the same mountain twice. Two men went to the same mountain to speak to God. The first one was Moses went to Mount Sinai, to a cave, and in that cave God showed up on Mount Sinai and a laser light show. And later on in life, hundreds of years later, a man named Elijah the prophet was running away from Jezebel, who was torturing him, and he knew that I got to speak to God. So he went to the rendezvous point, Mount Sinai. It was called Harary, and he went to the same cave where God was in, and he turned and he goes, oh, it's time for God. And the verse says that there was a firestorm, and he goes, come on, God. And it wasn't God. And there was an earthquake, and he goes, it wasn't God. And there was a lightning storm, and it wasn't God. And finally God spoke to him in what we call a kol demamadaka, a soft, silent speech. You ever get that speech? The feeling, the clarity? It's silent. And Elijah understood that God's speaking to me, but not in the way that he spoke to Moses. We think that God doesn't talk to us. You know why? Because he's not speaking to us in English. And we're sitting around waiting every day. Come on, you want me to believe in you? Talk my language. Poof me miracles. Then I'll believe in you. And every second of every day, every one of us in this room, God speaks to all day long. But we never have the humility to see it. Because we're waiting for it to be in our language. And God goes, I'm talking to you. In every spice and every move, I'm talking to you. So what are we really missing? And with this, I'll end. I want to tell you one more story about a friend of mine. You've heard a bunch of friend stories. I want to tell you one more. And I believe this is the reason why we don't see God in our lives. This is why we don't see God in the spices. This is why we can walk through our lives and wait for God to talk to us. And meanwhile, he has been speaking to us in nuances for years. In the advice we give people, in the spices of our lives, in the coincidences that happen to us. Why don't we get it for? And it's the second C. Here's what it is. I'll tell you one story and then I'll end. So I've got a buddy of mine who I was in law school with. He was the coolest guy I know. This is the coolest friend I have. Grew up in the Midwest in America. Wanted to get a degree. He didn't want to go to a regular college. So he went to a college in China and got a degree in Chinese. And then he was bored. He came back. He went to Yale. When he was done with Yale, he went to Harvard. And then after that, Nebuch, he came to Columbia. We became very close. And he's the coolest guy ever. He drove a motorcycle. He carried a gun. He was like James Bond with a brain. That's who he was. And he was very involved in an organization called FIDF, the Friend of Israeli Defense. And the FIDF donates infrastructure to Israeli soldiers, and he was very influential. And he one time went over to Israel to have a dedication to the rec center that he built for the soldiers. And he was talking to the people there, and they're finding out where you're from, background, blonde hair, blue eyes, perfect English, Chinese, fluently, the whole deal. Flies back to America, gets a call from some Israeli, says, listen, we had a gift to give you at the closing, at the ceremony, you weren't there, please come back to Israel, we want to give it to you in person. He goes, really? Just send it. He goes, no, you give to us, we give to you. Okay. Gets a free flight to El Al. Back in those days, that you now in El Al, you walk through. Remember the days where they took you down and they had a bus? You know what I'm talking about? You get to actually, when you landed on the ground. And he landed, he went to the ground, and there was a black car waiting for him. So, okay, picks up the black car, goes straight, bypasses all security, driving down to Yerushalayim, and about, a few miles, he said, before Yerushalayim, the car immediately turns off the road. And he's like, oh, okay. This is the moment. I don't know if they're Israelis, maybe they're Al-Qaeda, I don't know if they found me. And the car now is bumping along a dirt road till he gets all the way to the end. And he gets to the end and he sees in a small little cafe are 3 other Israelis eating olives, drinking black coffee, hummus, smoking cigarettes, talking 1,000,000 miles an hour. You know, and he comes in and they're just talking around him. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know if they're going to kill him, they're going to hug him. He doesn't know what's going on. And they sit down and he goes, "Why am I here for?" They go, "You know, we have a branch opening up in our intelligence department. You know, we were trying to get more into the Asian market. You're blonde, you're blue eyes, you're a clear Zionist, you speak perfect English, and you speak perfect Chinese. We'd like for you to apply to being an intelligence officer." He turns to me and goes, after the meeting, he calls me and goes, "Should I go?" I'm like, "Are you crazy? Like, what, are you going to be like a lawyer now? Like, this is how like spy movies start. Of course you should go." So he goes, "I'm going for it." I'm like, "Okay, good luck." Easy for me to say, you know what I'm saying? So he leaves for 5 years. I don't hear a word from him. 5 years later, I get a call. I'm coming back to the Midwest to see my parents. I live on the East Coast. I said, "Listen, come to JFK. It's an airport. Spend the night by me. Take a flight to the Midwest, see your parents." He goes, "Sure." Comes over to the night. I go, "Tell me everything." And he tells me a story like I'll never forget. He says, "I got there, and apparently the Army's harder than I thought." Right? We think like in America, like you just run on the treadmill, you can figure out the Army. No, it's not like that. It's a lot harder than anybody can appreciate. And I went through hours of training, and you don't just become an officer. You gotta apparently qualify through basic training. And then when you get to a certain level, then you can be picked, apparently. So he's going through it and going through it and going through it and going through it. And he's spending literally 5 years about to quit. Every time he quits, they help him through it. And he gets to his last training. And in his last training, he has to do one last test. This is his last test. If he passes this test, he qualifies to be a level of an officer that he can apply to do this intelligence thing. So he gets all the way there, and in the last test, the way it works is they teach you how to read coordinates so that you can pick somebody. Apparently, if someone, God forbid, gets kidnapped, you can't just Waze it, apparently. You don't like say, "Oh, Al Ahmed Street. Oh, I get it. I'll stop for a shawarma. Oh, what's the easiest way through Lebanon? Okay, I'll go through Lebanon." Apparently, they give you coordinates, and you got to learn how to get there on your own. Okay, so they teach you how to read coordinates, and they take you to the desert, and you do exercises trying to pick people up within a period of time studying coordinates, and he had to do this, and all he had to do was get to a location in a certain period of time. He passes. Easy. Last test. He's telling me the story. Goes in the morning, comes into the tent, in the middle of the desert somewhere, and they tell him, "You're going here," gives him the coordinates. He opens up the map. He finds exactly where it is. He takes his guy, they take a Jeep, and they're off. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, he's watching his watch, he sees the location, the distance, he's like, "Cakewalk, I'm gonna be fine." 2 minutes in, all of a sudden he hears pop. He turns around, the back tire blows out. And he starts screaming, "You didn't check the tire, you didn't check the tire," to his guy. He goes, "I checked the tire." And the Jeep spins out of control, they get out, he's yelling at his people. "How could you forget to check the tire? What are you, crazy? Fix it, fix it." His watch, the time is ticking down, a minute, 30 seconds. Now he's 10 seconds. And he goes, "Forget you guys." And he starts to run on his own. He's 1 minute late. He's 2 minutes late. And he comes running at this tiny little shack that they put him to that he picked. And he comes running, and there's a little door, he said. And he comes running at the door. And as he touches the door is locked. And there's a sign that says, "You failed." And he's heartbroken. 5 years. For the tire to blow out. So he goes back and he's so sad. And he goes back into his tent, and his commander goes to him and says, "Listen, it happens. It happens. Relax, calm down. It's a fluke. The tire blew out. Like we're watching you. Tomorrow morning you'll get another chance." Okay. Next day comes, tent, 5 o'clock, finds his coordinates. He looks at a spot, they put the spot near a sand dune, you have to park, and they have to run around this whole sand dune. Takes his guys, and they're off. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, they park the Jeep. "Tire's okay?" They're like, "Tire's okay." They park the Jeep, they get out, the 5 guys. As they're running around the sand dune, he hears, "Ow, ow, ow." He turns around and he sees that one of his guys is limping. He goes, "What happened?" He goes, "I don't know, I think I turned my ankle." He goes, "Are you crazy?" And they're like, "What do we do, sir?" They tried to carry him, but he was slowing them up, and he's looking at his watch, and he's got 3 minutes left and 2 minutes left. And he's like, he doesn't know what to do. He goes, "You know what, just leave him here. We'll find them later." They go, "But sir," go, "just leave him. He's holding us up," and he's yelling at him, "You're not running carefully enough." And now there's 2 minutes left, and on his own, he starts running for the thing, but now he's 20 seconds late, he's 30 seconds late. He comes up to that door, 40 seconds late, and it's locked. This time he's not sad. He is mad. He turns to God and goes, "Really, God? I come here for 5 years. This is what the luck I get. Oh, he goes, you know what? It's not God. You know who it is? It's the Israelis. Yeah, they don't want an American guy to win. I know what's going on here. I can finish it. I know what's going on here. I know. You know what? They're trying to fail me. I know what's happening. He comes back to the tent. He said to his barracks, and he ripped the place to shreds. And the guy comes up to me, and he almost attacked his commander. And he goes, you guys are trying to make me fail. You don't want me to win. I can tell. He goes, relax, relax. He goes, really? Just happens? He goes, relax. He goes, we're going to meet about you in an hour. I'll tell you what happens if you fail or pass. 2 hours later, he comes back and goes, listen, you play baseball? He goes, yeah. He goes, you have a rule, 3 strikes. Tomorrow, last strike. You don't pass tomorrow, they say. Wasn't meant to be. One more chance. And he says to me, I was sure as day that they were going to fail me. They were just going through the formalities. So he goes, I went to bed that night, I was calm. And I spent the whole night thinking about my whole experience. You know, it's been, the call, the jeep, the road, the hummus, they asked me to come, and he's just remembering. It's just so amazing how long it's been taking. And he's just having like a memory trip. And as he's going through, he goes, wait a second. The guy that night, he said something. There was one guy that said something that really got me excited about the Israeli army. What did he say? Oh yeah, he said that what makes an Israeli officer is that you never leave your man behind. We're a brotherhood. I love that. Whatever happened to that guy? Oh yeah, that guy. 3 years later, I almost failed the course, and I remember they were trying to convince me to stay, and I saw that guy in the distance. It's so funny. Where's that guy? He goes, oh yeah, remember. Oh, when I was donating that building, I remember the guys talking about they were messing with them on some tests. What was that? And he's trying to put the pieces together, and he's going, wait a second. He goes, wait a second. They're not trying to fail me. They're trying to pass me. I'm taking the wrong test. The test isn't whether I can get to the door in time. The test is what happens if I'm on the way to a door and one of my men go down. Because what it means to be an Israeli officer, you never leave a man behind. They're trying to pass me. I forgot the lesson. They're testing to see if when all goes bad, if I leave my guys, I'm taking the wrong test. He said he got up at 3 a.m. when he figured this out. He dressed in his uniform and waited by the door. 5 o'clock. New coordinates. I got it. 2 jeeps, no problem. We go on this location. He tells his team, Jeep 1, Jeep 2, and they're off. 10 minutes. Smooth. 8, 7, 5, 2. Smooth. He can see in the distance. And as he's ready to see his place, on the walkie-talkie goes, sir, we got a problem. The other Jeep is going through problems. And he can feel the anger, and he pushes it right down. He goes, I got this. And he spins the Jeep around, and he helps out Jeep 1 and Jeep 2, and he secures the soldiers. And like the leader that he always was, he takes care of his men. He watched them, he protects them, and he knows he's missing his time, but he did exactly what he thinks was the right thing to do. And he turns around a minute late, 2 minutes late, and he goes and he runs for the door, but he knows his men were taken care of, and he did exactly what was right. And he comes at that door, and he's 2 minutes late and 3 minutes late. And as he goes at the door 3 minutes late, he's expecting for it to be locked, and it's open. And he opens the door. And by the way, if this had happened in South Africa or in America, there'd be like balloons, and they would call grandma, and they would take pictures, and they would have a kiddish. It's Israelis. They're like, Beseder, go do something important or something. You know what I'm saying? You know why we don't see God in our lives? Because we're missing the sea of seas. The big sea of confidence. We don't think we're worthy of God. We believe in Him, but we don't think He believes in us. We are sure as day that God's got more to do than just take care of us. He's not working spices for me. Charlie, you don't even know who I am. Trust me when I tell you, I'm not that important. Any parent have a kid tell you that, and you tell the kid, you have no idea how much you mean to me? That's God to us. And we live our lives and we think the test of life is getting stuff. And hopefully God hooks us up in what we want. And we can go a whole life thinking that it's what I want, right? And God's hooking me up because I have it all figured out. But we're taking the wrong test. The test is not getting things. The test is becoming something. And every second of every day, God is spending His life making us into commandos. And if we can just stop taking our test and start asking, what do you want from me? What are you telling me? What did that mean to me? When you can see God in the spices of life, then you become, whether you win or lose, whether they pat you on the back or not, whether you get more or less money or success, what you become is truly successful. Success in Judaism is truly the ability to smell the spices, to walk with confidence that the creator of humanity has changed the world and is speaking to you every single day, guiding you through life. If we can just be humble enough to have the confidence in ourselves and have the communication to hear what he wants from us every moment. And that is true success. Thank you very much.